Felix Zulauf is one of the true legends of the investment industry, and a man I've been waiting to meet in person for almost a decade. Over the course of a day in Naples, Florida, I was treated to a fascinating look inside the mind of a man who's made bold calls and demonstrated an uncanny knack of identifying big turning points in markets and then capitalizing on them. Not all of what we talked about made it into the final cut of our conversation, but that certainly doesn't mean that what was left out is any less valuable. Here's a little look at what was a truly wonderful conversation. Market timers tend to be early by 6 months to a year, sometimes more, particularly in this cycle, as we've talked, it's been elongated. But 87, you were early by a matter of days. Japan, you were early by almost a matter of hours. And the telco.com, you were right there, January 2000. In terms of spotting turning points coming, but watching for that moment at which to actually do something about it, are there any particular signs that you look for that make you say, okay, what was it about January 2000 and what was it about September 87? And what was it about the beginning of 1990 in Japan? Because there's something going on here that's remarkably close to those turning points.
Well, first of all, it's the fundamental framework. When the monetary liquidity situation begins to tighten, you know you are close to a turning point. And then it's a timing question. And then you go to your timing tools, and that's technical analysis. So you do your trend analysis and you measure the trends, whether the trends begin to mature and lose power. And you work closer to that point where it turns. You can still make mistakes,
sure,
but that's how I work, the trend and momentum. Valuation is crazy at that point. And you see the monetary situation is deteriorating. Then you go to your technical tools, and trend and momentum is what I use. And then somehow the days before something crazy happens, I always had sort of a gut feeling. It was always like I had some electricity vibrating in my stomach,
right.
And my wife could confirm them. I always told, in all those instances, I told my wife, something is going to happen. I feel it, something is going to happen. We are getting close. So when you live with the markets and when it means a lot to you, what you do as a profession, as a job, and analyzing the world and markets, then it just feeds back to you, yeah. and you feel it.
I find this really interesting. I spoke to Richard Pomboy, Stephanie Pomboy and Eric Pomboy's father, and he had a similar experience in 87. He went to 100% cash the day before it happened. And he said it was just a gut feel. I knew something was building and something was going on and it didn't feel right. And for whatever reason on that morning, I came in and I said, there's a crash going to happen. And he went to 100% cash. So soon before it happened that he hadn't had time to tell his investors. So they were ringing up on the morning of October 19th, 87 saying, oh my God, we're ruined. And he said, well, I didn't have time to tell you, but we're 100% in cash, don't worry.
I think that was a Monday,
yes,
that October
correct.
19th, and I was actually out. I was delivering a speech in southern Germany. There was a reunion of a big company with their clients, and I delivered a speech before dinner, a pre-dinner speech. And I think I opened the speech by saying, this is a speech you will never forget, not because of what I tell you, but because of what's going to happen tonight.
Really?
And you saw the opening already. You saw the closing on Friday, and we didn't have smartphones at that time, mm-hmm. but we had those little Reuters machines, yep. The pocket Reuters.
Yep.
And I saw the opening with a delay. I saw the opening, so I said, "This is a dinner speech you will never forget, not because of me, but because of what will happen tonight." And the other morning at breakfast, they all showed up at breakfast. Everybody was paid.
White-faced, yeah, right.
It was an interesting experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you describe these turning points, the reduction of liquidity, the trends, the momentums, the technical analysis, we're there now. It feels like to me we can see the liquidity. In many ways, certainly from the Federal Reserve, is starting to be reined in, even though on a global basis, which I guess is maybe the difference now, it still feels like it's expanding.
It's very interesting you say that, because on January 24 this year,
Yeah.
I held a webinar for our clients together with Ed Hyman for his clients. And it was just a fireside chat about what we see going on and what's coming. And in that webinar, I said, it feels to me like 87. It feels to me like 87. Something is in the air. We have liquidity getting tighter. We have extended markets, and something could happen very short term. You have the finance, the secretary of the treasury talking down the dollar, like then. You have bond yields going up. You have stocks going up and losing momentum. Something is in the air, and a few days later it started.
Yeah. So when you look at that now, but we do have this. The world seems much more globally connected now than it was back in '87. Things, even though it was a global crash, it was kind of a bunch of isolated crashes happening in tandem.
Yeah.
Now it feels as though, since the end of QE3, there's an extra $5 trillion of stimulus that's been applied by the Bank of Japan and People's Bank of China, etc., and the Swiss National Bank, who are at it crazy. When you have that feeling like you had at the end of January, do you feel as though the ultimate outcome of that feeling is going to be dissipated now because of the money can be injected into this system from anywhere?
I think it's more synchronized today, but we are not quite there in the liquidity tightening cycle where we were in '87. We are not quite there. It's not as extreme yet. There is still plenty of liquidity around. So I think this was a little warning crack. Markets have rallied after that crack. The Nasdaq and those disruptors are making new highs, but just a few names. The majority of the Nasdaq 100 stocks is not making new highs, so that shows you deteriorating rest. I think there is going to be a second decline coming into this spring or so. I do not know exactly when, but I think the downside is bigger, clearly bigger than the upside. And once that is over, I think markets are going to try the upside once again, but I do not know for how long. Because when you look at the monetary situation, the Fed will tighten and will soak up liquidity. The ECB will stop its QE in September. That is a big change.
Yep.
I think the Chinese are trying to restructure the financial sector, which is slowing down the credit aggregates. So I think they are also tightening, and they have raised interest rates quite a lot over the last 2 years. So I think there is some tightening going on in the global arena. And all we need then, but it's smoother, it's gentler, it is spread out because nobody wants to rock the boat. So until we see some deterioration somewhere in the world economy or the financial system, the strong stocks will try to rally again. And the strong stocks and the strong segments of the global markets will make new highs. I doubt that the weak ones will. Europe, for instance, is by far the weakest region. They will not make new highs. I really doubt. And so I think 2019 is probably the situation or the window when liquidity is really tight and when the fiscal stimulus is slowly abating. And then I think we are ready for the big downturn. So I think peaking out sometimes in the second half of this year and then down into 2020.